Okay. So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining. Um, I originally made this presentation to just touch on some of the basics as it relates to our resilience and longevity. Those are big buzzwords in the health and wellness space right now. And I think some of the really basic things are getting missed because it's all about the fancy supplements and fancy things and devices and gadgets that you need to do and get to make your life more abundant and improve your health. As I go through this, I'm going to give you some really simple day-to-day things. So let's get on with it. So building your resilience and longevity, improving your balance. This information is for you, for anyone you care about, and what to do with this information. So about me, the presenter. So I went to UC San Diego, studied physiology, neuroscience, then got my doctorate in physical therapy, University of St. Augustine. And I did 8 years in outpatient neuro setting, specifically for balance and vestibular disorders. I became a certified functional manual therapist in 2021. I'm happy to field any questions regarding that at the end of the presentation. And then I just finished my fellowship, and I am now opening a clinic in Long Beach with IPA Physio as the clinical director. That actually starts this week. So here's a question for you. Can you do this? This person is single leg balance on an uneven surface. Not to say also that the waves aren't coming in and causing a disruption in that balance as well. So show of hands, who has, and you can do this by, there should be a little reaction ability on your Zoom, or you can throw in the chat, and you can also throw any questions in the chat. But show of hands, who has had an instance when they felt their balance was challenged or they experienced disequilibrium? Yeah. Okay. So I see 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands, 5 hands. So it's fairly common that we at some point have had our balance challenged. If you even think about as kids when we were learning to walk, our balance was challenged, right? Kids are falling all the time. And so that is at the beginning when we're building this ability to take in the complexities of our environment and move through it without falling down. So there's a lot more to that. So the objectives of today is, what is balance? How does it relate to your longevity? How can I detect a balance issue? And what can I do about it? So what's the big deal? So a 2021 cohort study published in JAMA, which is the Journal of American Medical Association, found that adults with balance disorders had significantly higher risks of death from all causes. And then a 2023 prospective cohort study of over 18,000 middle-aged and older adults showed a 10% decrease in risk of all-cause mortality for every 1 second increase in their static balance ability as measured by single leg stance time. So that means, like the kiddo in the picture here, for every 1 second you can stand on your leg, you increase your ability to stay alive by 1 second. And they're looking across the board at multiple causes, not just falling and having a severe accident. So we know from these studies that there is a direct link to our longevity and our ability to balance. Okay, so what exactly is balance? You have information that comes in, you have integration of that information, and then you have action that comes out. So the info that's coming in, that's your vestibular system, info coming in through your vestibular system, your visual, and your somatosensory system. That, all that information comes into the brain here, and then it goes out as action. We're going to go into this in a little bit more detail. So you want to think of balance as this big pie. You have all these different systems working together. Each slice of the pie can then be challenged based on an exercise or an environment. It can also be teased out in how we examine that aspect of our balance. But truly, all of it has to work together in order to keep you upright in a dark room, or walking on a creek bed, or like the image in the beginning where someone's standing single leg in the sand. So specifically, that information coming in is that vestibular system. I keep throwing this word out, vestibular. What does that mean? So that is this special mechanism that is embedded in our temporal bone on either, we have one on either side, and it's responsible for providing us information about our equilibrium, our spatial awareness, and whether we're moving with our head in rotation or if we're moving straight forward or up and down. So for example, an elevator or moving in your car would be linear. Rotation would be moving your head. And then here's a picture of that. There's that vestibular system embedded in the bone there. And you can see its proximity to the ears. So sometimes people who have an issue with this might have dizziness as well. So then you have your visual system, that's your sight and your visual processing, how you're putting everything together. So here's a picture of the eye, and you can see all the intricacies of the blood vessels and the nerves that come in through this area as well. And then proprioception, that's how you're taking in information through your other senses. So in this case, proprioception would be that somatosensory system. So your touch or your ability to feel where your joints are in space based on special receptors in your joints and in your skin. The information then goes outward, and you have special mechanisms in place that help these parts work together. So the first one would be your vestibulo-ocular reflex. That's when the eyes and the vestibular system work together. And so you're able to fixate your eyes while you move your head, rather than most animals, they move their eyes and their head together. So I'm able to stare right at you there, and I can turn my head and keep my eyes focused right on you. Your vestibulospinal reflex, that is that vestibular system working now with the receptors in the joints in your neck. And so that's providing information downward into how to then stabilize through the rest of the body in the spine. And then that leads us to motor control. So these are our muscles in our ankles, our legs, our hips, and our trunk, even our arms now responding. So you can think about someone who's on a tightrope will put their arms out. That's another mechanism to help them to balance. So in the brain specifically, our cerebellum, which we call the small brain, sits in the back here. It coordinates movement and adjusts and corrects when we have challenges to our balance. So if you, for example, have a younger sibling that that knocks into you, but doesn't knock into you so far as to knock you over, your cerebellum is kicking in so that it can help you correct. Your cerebrum, which is up through here, it integrates sensory information, plans, and initiates a response. So this takes a little bit more time. And so in comparison to some of the reflexes that I discussed earlier. And then your brain stem, which is right at the base of your skull where it starts to come into your neck, this is the headquarters for all the information coming in from the vestibular system. And it really is the information highway as to what exactly is happening and how you're going to respond to a situation that requires a change in your balance. So again, here's a nice image of that. So the cerebellum is the smaller brain. It kind of looks like feathers here. And then the cerebrum is up top. And then that brainstem is this kind of pink area that has the pons here in the front. Okay, so there's the snapshot of what balance is. And I did get in the weeds a little bit. Now is the applicable part of the evening, whereas here are some self-tests. So I've listed off some self-tests here. This first one is actually a written self-test that everyone that participates tonight, I will be emailing them a copy of this so that they can take a written test and look at their confidence scale. It's a series of questions. It's a subjective scale, and it really examines what your confidence level is based on the activity. So one of the questions is, how confident are you from a scale of 0 to 100 walking on an icy sidewalk? And so now here in Southern California, we don't participate so much with icy sidewalks, but it is a great example of, if you came across an icy sidewalk, would you be comfortable navigating that? So as I go along here, these other tests are ones that we're going to go through together. So we have the Romberg, the sharpened Romberg, the modified sit-sib, the single leg stance, dynamic visual acuity test, the Fukuda step test, and then walking. So let's go through them. Anyone who wants to participate, you're welcome to. Please keep safety in mind. So for these first ones, you do not need any, you really only need potentially a chair or something to tap down on to check your balance, but you do not need any other props. So for the Romberg test, just like in the image, you're going to stand with your feet together, as close together as you can, arms down at your side, and you're going to see, can you even do this? Can you do this with your eyes open? If you can do this very easily with your eyes open, then try with your eyes closed. Can you do this with your eyes closed? And some of the things that you're being aware of is, are you able to do this with very little sway? So sway would be how much movement you have. Do you have a lot of movement? Are you able to do this without stepping? And this is the very basic beginning examination of balance. Now, if you're finding that you're doing this fairly well, you can then move on to sharpened Romberg. So sharpened Romberg, you're still standing on a firm surface, but just like the person in the image, you're placing one foot in tandem in front of the other. So in tandem with your eyes open, are you able to stand with minimum sway? If you're finding this easy, try eyes closed. Okay, so I see some people are having a hard time with this. I'm going to move on to the next one. Let's see. This is now where you're going to want a sofa cushion or a pillow, or you can even use a balled up sweater, something that's going to create an uneven surface. Now we're essentially using the Romberg, which was the first test that we did. And you're going to do that on the surface that you picked. So sofa cushion or whatever you grabbed. You're going to place that on the ground. And this is part of the modified clinical test of sensory interaction balance, also known as the modified sit-sib. Just like the Romberg, your feet are together, like the person in the image here that's standing on the foam. And you're going to see, can you stand with your eyes open? Now, in this, the goal for each of these positions for the modified sit-sib would be 30 seconds. So can you stand on the foam with your eyes open? And how do you do? Do you have a minimum sway? Do you have an ability now to close your eyes? If you close your eyes, here's the next question. If you're an uneven surface and your eyes are closed, do you notice, do you sway one direction more than the other? Do you sway primarily towards your left? Or do you sway primarily forward and back? These are all good things to make notes of. So this would be a really important eye opener if you're having a hard time with this. In a situation in which you find yourself in a dark environment and you're unfamiliar with the environment or lay of the land. Now you're trying to navigate an area that you're unsure of that may have uneven surfaces with your eyes closed. And so you can see that your balance needs a little bit of work to help you navigate that environment without an increased risk of falling. So from here, we check, how is your single leg stance? That goes back to the research that I referenced early on. Can you stand and make sure you've got somewhere to hold on to start? Can you stand on a single leg? So the way I like to instruct this is whatever surface that you've got in front of you to help, both hands are down on the surface. Then you pick up your hand one at a time. As you're standing there, your eyes should be open. And the same questions arise. Can you stand single leg, hovering your hands, eyes open, and what's the sway? Then see, can you do it eyes closed? Eyes closed is significantly harder on single leg than it is even with the modified sit-sib. And you'll find that. Now try the other leg. Is there a difference between your left and your right side? Is that an indicative of an old injury? Is that because you've had a past ear infection repeated on one side? These are all things that can play into our balance. And so sometimes what can happen is as we go through life, we have these little things that kind of eat away at our balance that goes unnoticed for long periods of time because we're so good at adapting. And then when we do these self-tests, it becomes quite eye-opening, pun intended, to what actually we need to work on. So if we move on here, I'm going to show you the dynamic visual acuity test using a video. This is a little bit more involved. This really is for someone who might be experiencing some balance disturbance that is pretty low level, but they also have noticed that it's a little bit harder to read, or that there is a little bit of some uneasiness in their environment or busy environments. So let's go ahead and watch here. Okay, so the patient actually cleared the test. It was normal. It seems a little wild, but based on the research, moving your head at that speed, it's 2 hertz, you should be able to read a 3-line difference. So in the next slide, I do have a Snellen chart so everyone can test themselves. And I actually have a metronome that's queued up. So we'll get a metronome going so you know how quickly to move your head. But before we get to that, I just want to go through these other 2 because I'm not going to actually have you do these other 2, but I want to explain what they are. So the Fukuda step test it's fun to do. It's interesting. It's not hugely on its own. It's not hugely indicative whether or not you have a balance issue, but it gives you some cool information with other things in addition to it. So what you do, and I'm going to demonstrate this one, is you're actually going to stand, your arms are going to be out, your eyes are closed, and with your eyes closed, you're going to march in place. And as you march in place, you'll have someone to spot you. You're going to do it, I would say you're going to do it for roughly 30 seconds. I'm going to stop there even though it hasn't been 30 seconds. And you're going to see whether or not you've turned. You're going to see whether or not you've veered to one side. You're going to see whether or not you've moved forward. And someone who has a fairly significant, we'll call it an issue or a dysfunction, is going to veer significantly one way or the other. And depending on how long they've had this issue, it's going to be one way or the other. If that exists or is involved, it does give you a really big wake-up call, like, whoa, okay, I need to work on my balance. This is something that's really important for my overall health and longevity. Now, the other things that can be done, and this, I'm hoping all of you do some sort of daily walk or some sort of walk out in nature or in your neighborhood. One of the things that you can do to test yourself is to turn your head while you're walking. And by that, I mean turn your head side to side while you're walking. If you're walking with someone who can spot you, you can also try closing your eyes while you're walking and see, do you stay along a straight path or do you veer off to one side or the other? This can also give you some information about what might be going on with your balance. So if we go on to the next page here, here's that Snell and Ari chart. So what I'd like you to do, if you want to participate in this, stand, let's just make it consistent. So if you're on your cell phone, make your cell phone at arm's length, okay? If you are on a laptop or an iPad, let's have you go at about, say, 24 to 36 inches. So I'm about 36 inches away from my laptop at this point. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second so I can pull up the metronome for you. Okay, here. Actually, I'm still sharing. Okay, here we go. So here's the metronome. So before we even do the metronome, go through the eye chart. Here we go. Okay, go through the eye chart. And at that distance we just discussed, see which line that you can read clearly. If you're guessing, then you can get closer, see if you're right and come back, but or maybe that's the line that you should be in. Okay, doesn't need to be super complicated. Once you figure out which line it is, number it, and I'm going to play the metronome just to help me get the metronome down, and then I'll say it so that you can hear it while you try to move your head side to side. So here we go. So here's the metronome. And I know I need to bring it back so that you can actually see the Snellen chart. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you hear the metronome? No, okay. Okay, so you're moving your head back and forth. And which one can you read? So, yeah, Rod, you've got it down, but now you got to open your eyes while you do it and see which one you can read. This was a good one. Everyone's very interested in this one. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to turn the metronome off since you guys can't hear it anyways. I'm going to exit the screen really quickly. Okay, now I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to unmute everyone because I'm just curious what people found. So let me figure out how to unmute people. Or actually, I'll have you, if anyone wants to share, I'll have you raise your hand and I'll unmute you. How about that? Does anyone want to share?
I'll share. I couldn't do this moving my head. I'm feeling very nauseous now.
Okay, so that is a a good test of your body's ability to maintain your fixation of your eyes while your head is moving. So if you say we're in the clinic with me, I would say, okay, well, we need to further examine the contributions potentially of your vestibulo-ocular reflex to your balance. And so in the next part, I'll specifically show you which exercises you could even start doing to address and make this better. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you. I think I need a Tylenol now to get rid of the headache
Oh
it
no.
created.
Oh no. Okay, so moving along. So now I'll talk about the specific exercises. These exercises, as I talk about them, I'll say, okay, if you had an issue with this is what I would recommend. Or if you had an issue with this is what I would recommend. So first we'll start with, I'll read through these really quick. So staggered stance with eyes on the target in diagonals. VOR exercises. VOR stands for vestibular ocular reflex. So this is specifically alluding to what Melanie was sharing. And so the fact that she had some symptoms from doing the test, I would say, okay, don't start the VR exercises yet. We've got to figure out why she had symptoms related to the test first. And then SLS stands for single leg stance. Eyes open, eyes closed, tossing a ball, ankle doing ABCs with an eye target. And again, I'm going to explain these. And then head turns with walking, which I mentioned. Heel raises, toe raises, and those are what they sound like. And then this exercise here at the end called freeing the ball, which is one of my favorites and a really important one, but you do that one lying down. So I figured we'd end with that one. So staggered stance with eye target in diagonals. What does that mean? So a staggered stance, actually, I'm going to get a little closer to the screen. So staggered stance would be this, what we worked on earlier is a tandem stance, right? One foot right in front of the other. That was sharpened Romberg. This feet together was in Romberg. Staggered stance is like this. So it's like you've taken a step and you've stopped mid stance. So it's not as hard as tandem, but not as easy as Romberg because it covers a greater amount of surface area. Can you see that? So if you're in staggered stance, you can then give yourself an eye target. So in this case, I'm using my thumbs and I'm putting one thumb down low and one thumb up a little bit. And now what I can do is as I am in staggered stance, I can look down at my right thumb and then look up at my left thumb. And I can do this with my eyes, or I can do this with my head. And I'm starting to challenge my ankles because I'm changing my visual target while I'm balancing. And then I can switch and I can do it the other way. And it doesn't have to be my thumbs. It can be a sticky on the wall. It can be furniture in your room. It can be flowers outside. It doesn't have to be your thumbs. The goal is changing your visual target while you're in a functional position like staggered stance, mid stance, walking. So then VOR exercises, it would be a step up from this. So specifically, VOR exercises is a single target. So in this case, I'm going to use the top of my pen here. I am looking at the top of my pen and I'm specifically on an angle so you can see my face. And my eyes are focused on the top of that pen, and I'm turning my head from side to side. My eyes remain on the top of that pen as I move my head side to side. The whole purpose of this exercise is the ability of the eyes to stay here while the head is moving. If you're moving and your eyes start going off the target, then you either aren't ready for this or you have to slow down. If you're doing this and you notice that you're starting to do funky things with your neck, that could be that you're not ready for this or you've got to slow down. Do you have a question, Danny?
Are we sitting or standing doing this? Does it matter?
So if you do it sitting and you have no problem whatsoever, you can do it standing.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that because that segues into what I was going to say next. That was perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. The important part about this is once you've got this down and sitting, you get to start challenging the other parts of your balance while you're doing it. So you could then put yourself in the Romberg position. You could try putting yourself in staggered stance, which we just practiced. You could try putting yourself on a piece of foam. Each of those positions is going to start challenging how the brain and the body are integrating everything together. And that's what's going to make it more and more functional towards your daily life, like being in a grocery store or being out on a soccer pitch, watching kids play, whatever it might be. Any other questions? Okay, so moving on. So I alluded to this when I was going through the list of exercises, especially because the research shows us that single leg stance is directly linked. 1 second of single leg stance is directly linked to an increase, 10% increase in our longevity, mortality. Practicing single leg stance should be something that we all are doing every day. Duh, so easy, so easy, right? So typically what I recommend, we all brush our teeth, I hope. Doing a single leg stance when you're brushing your teeth or right before or right after you brush your teeth is the easiest way to integrate it into your day. If single leg stance is too challenging because of a previous injury, or it's really just that hard with your eyes open, totally okay. Back it off and do staggered stance. But if you can walk, you can do a single leg stance for a fraction of a second. And so, or if you can go up and downstairs, you can do single leg stance for a fraction of a second. And so practicing that is really important. Challenging that, eyes open first, but the goal then would be doing it eyes closed or dynamic. The reason why you want to try to move towards eyes closed or dynamic is because you're suppressing that visual system, or you're not allowing yourself to rely so heavily on that visual system. And so you're forcing those other systems to kick in more. So you're improving the neural relay to those systems. It's the redundancy that's the most important. Most of us in this society rely very heavily on our eyes. And so what ends up happening is those other systems are just not as strong. And this is one of a really easy way that you can build those other systems up. So what do I mean by tossing a ball? So the image in the center here, you see two individuals tossing a ball back and forth while practicing single leg. This could be tossing a ball against a wall, a tennis ball, something dynamic. Ankle ABCs. So the top leg, so the image on the left near the text there, she could be using that leg that's in the air, and she could be actually turning her ankle and doing the ABCs with her ankle. And then with an eye target. So this would be very similar to what I mentioned with the staggered stance, giving yourself a target to look at or even move your head to while you're practicing single leg stance. Okay, so I mentioned this a little earlier. If you go for a daily walk, very easy to add head turns in while you're walking. This could be something as simple as looking at different homes you're walking by, reading license plate numbers on cars you're walking by, thinking about what can you hear out of one ear if that one's forward versus the other one that's forward. Just finding a way to change your head's relationship to your body as you're ambulating forward. So, heel raises and toe raises. Sounds very simple. It is shocking how quickly this goes away. So, what I'd like, I think everybody could do this. What I'd like is everyone to stand up, please. Everyone's going to stand up, and you can use a surface, but like the first image, if you don't want to use a surface, you can have your arms out. And I'd like everyone to come up off of their heels and onto their toes. Just see how high they can go. Just do a body scan. See how high you can go. So lifting up off of your heels onto your toes. Now, once you've done that, you have a sense of the height in which you can go. Now, can you do 25 of them? That's a lot. And you're going to get tired and you're going to get sore. And can you get up to that same height on each repetition? Or does it start getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter? Ideally, you want to be able to do these every day. If you're integrating this in and you haven't done them in a while, you're going to be sore. It's going to be a little tough. So maybe start with 5, 3 times a day. So that's 15, and slowly start building this in. Now, the reverse, toes up. We don't really think about that much. Also very important, because when we're starting to lose our balance backward, we actually pull our toes up to try to bring our body back. So if you're standing up, just start to lean backward, and you'll feel the tops of your lower leg just under your knee start to engage. Those are the same muscles that pull your toes up. So if you're in standing, and you can use the surface if you need to, try pulling those toes up so that you go onto your heels. And do that a few times. If you're having a really challenging time doing this without your tush sticking way out, you can do it against the wall. So if I'm here, I'm going to lean against the wall, and then I'm going to pull my toes up so that I can't lean back anymore. So very simple, but very important. The ankles are our first line of defense when we start to lose our balance. Our ankles kick in to be the first response to imbalance. Okay, so lastly, freeing the ball. So one of the first things that we lose as we become more sedentary, fill in the blank as to why, okay? When we become more sedentary, we start losing the mobility of our hips. When we lose the mobility of our hips, getting off the ground gets much challenging. Getting out of chairs gets much more challenging. And this all relates to our standing balance as well. So if you're having a challenging time getting from a seated position into a standing position, partly because of your hip mobility, once you get into standing, your balance is going to be more challenged. So freeing the ball is borrowed from Feldenkrais, and it really is a very nice, smooth exercise that really just works on the control and mobility of the hip. So I'm going to set it up so you can see me here. All right. You're going to lie on your back like the person in the image. One leg is out straight, just like the person in the image, and one knee is bent. And again, I'll just a reminder, if you do not want to do this now or you do not have a space to lie down, this is going to be recorded and you can watch the recording or you can do it later. So let me just demonstrate. So, pop my shoes off. So you're going to be here, and I know you all can hear me because I have my headphones in. So one of my legs is out straight, my other leg is bent. The bent knee is going to move in and out a very small amount, very slowly. And each repetition, it's going to get a little bit larger. And I'm still moving quite slow, and I'm moving in and back out. And what I'm finding after having a long day at work is as my leg moves out, there's a little bit of shaking that's happening. It's a little shaky. It's not smooth. So that's something I'm noticing for myself. But as I do more and more repetitions, it becomes smoother and smoother. And I can move through more and more of my range without the shaking. So I'm full range now on my right side, and that was roughly, I don't know, maybe 30, 45 seconds. And then I can go on to the other side. And it is so simple. One of the ways that, and I should have done this before I did the demonstration, but that you can check if the mobility improves is lying with both legs out straight and just taking a body scan of how does your body feel when you're lying with your legs out? Like, what is your ink stamp on the ground? And after you do the exercise, I think what you'll feel is that you feel a lot more lengthened through your system. Another thing that you could try is doing a sit to stand before you do the exercise, and then doing the exercise and then trying to sit to stand again and noticing if there's an increased ease in your mobility. So that's all of the exercises and the self-tests. Now, this is just a snapshot. These are kind of like the big ones that I pulled out. There's a lot more to this, as you may guess. Does anyone have any questions?
Well,
And actually,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was going to say, I got to pull up the chat too and see if there's any questions in the chat.
I was just going to say with the cat one example, is it important to be making that face when we try something like this?
Absolutely. Okay, let's look in the chat. So in the chat, yeah, so definitely having cervical fusion is going to impact balance. because your neck gives you input about where you are in space. Now, with that being said, your body adapts. So it may have impacted your balance quite a bit immediately after surgery, and then your body adapts and integrates and uses other aspects of your balance. That's why redundancy is so important. And so one of the things I should have emphasized a little bit more is I really talked about those 3 sensory systems. When all 3 are kicked in, you're groovy. If 2 of them are kicked in, you're still okay. It's when you are down to 1 and you can only rely on 1 that you're in trouble. And so oftentimes we're in situations, or when we are in trouble, we're in situations where we're trying to rely on our vision because that's our strongest usually, and we cannot because we haven't taken the time to strengthen the vestibular and the somatosensory systems. Okay, let's see. So standing on the pillow versus the carpet, yeah, it's really interesting. Sometimes the carpet's going to be a little bit more challenging because sometimes what ends up happening is, depending on the density of the pillow, it's actually going to come around and provide a little support because it's on either side. So it's like it creates a surface area support on the outsides of your feet. Yeah, so I'm focusing on the breath. Something I did not touch on here. And that includes also like having the knees slightly bent versus totally straight with balance, but using the breath as a natural activation of the core because our diaphragm is part of our core, hugely important for our balance. But I rarely cue people to focus on their core when they're balancing because I want it to be functional. So the cue of focusing on the breath, I like a lot more because that's functional. Glute activation, yes. So also when it comes to balance, especially when you're doing single leg stance, if you think about walking, every time you are lifting a leg when you walk, you have another leg into the ground. So if you're pushing into the ground, the reciprocation of that is lifting. And so your glute in that stance leg is going to be very strong and sturdy because you're focusing on pushing while you're lifting. So that it's that counterbalance. So that's something you can think about when you're doing the single leg. And as far as like the leg straight versus the slight knee bend, I typically recommend a slight knee bend versus totally straight. Usually totally straight creates a it's where you're really relying on the ligaments and you're not muscle ready to act. And so it's more passive. I think I got to everything. Does anyone else have another question?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I feel like I want to put all my personal training clients through these tests. Would that be like a good option?
Yeah.
Like I have like a 78-year-old who I do a lot of this stuff with her already just because like we are worried about like falls and stuff, but I feel like
Yeah.
the Romberg, looks like that's going to be really lit up. You said you'll email us all this so I can have.
Yeah. So I'm happy. I'll email the PDF of the presentation, but I also, everyone who signed up, I'm going to also email the ABC subjective questionnaire, which is also really helpful because you can have your clients do the subjective questionnaire and maybe after 6 weeks, have them do it again so that they're seeing, oh yeah, okay, I am working on my balance and I do feel more confident doing these things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Oh, I see. Haley, will engaging in these exercises help reduce motion sickness? Yes, a little bit, but there's other things that need to be addressed with motion sickness. So this is like the tip of the iceberg. Motion sickness, there's a whole nother thing to look through. It's really how the eyes are so dominant and how you're engaging in the world and upregulating that vestibular system and downregulating the vision. So oftentimes with motion sickness, they say, okay, look at a far point. It's so you have less motion or movement in your visual field. Anybody else? I know. Yeah. I want to let everybody know, thank you, Rod, for reminding me. I love all y'all so much that I'm doing this during Monday Night Football when my team is playing. And then one more shameless plug. So iPay Physio Long Beach is opening this week. So I just wanted to get the word out there. And if you know anyone in South Bay or in the LA area that needs great PT, send them our way. And here, and I'll make sure you have all these resources. Here are some resources that I went back to that I really like for balance and dizziness. Thank you everyone for joining me. I really had fun and I hope it was helpful and useful. And I wish everyone a great night. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Bye.